Hey y'all, how you doing today? CVMG coming back at you with a little bit more Volzerk Monsters and Lands Unknown. Now, people are under the impression that this is a gacha game, and that's actually not true. Gacha is more along the lines of like hero banners, loot boxes, loot crates, and things of that nature. Characters in Volzerk more serve the purpose of like a paid function for the game. Of course, you're not going to be able to form a top tier team for free, but if you combine the free 4-star that you get with like Play Store points or something, then it is possible to walk away with a full team for a very minimal price. But this begs the question of which 4-star character you should be scouting for free. Now, seeing all of these characters here may be a little bit daunting, especially if you're not familiar with their statistics page and all of this information being thrown at you. Now, I can tell you this much: between the 20 4-star characters that are available here, between my two accounts, I've played about 10 of them heavily. Here on this account, I've dabbled with 5, and I have another account that has another 5, but that being said, it's not like I'm going to be an expert on every single character. So first, I'm going to go over the characters that I'm more comfortable talking about, but then whenever we get to some of the characters that I haven't played that much, if you want, feel free to leave in a comment any information that I leave out. Starting with Tori, looking at his base stats, he actually does have a pretty high elemental multiplier and attack percent, which is really the stat that I'm going to be focusing on. SP is nice too, but really every other stat is pretty much irrelevant because you can just dodge everything in the game. So with that information out there, all of these eligible hearts to be initiated have to deal with HP, which I don't think is that important, so that's going to hurt his rating a little bit. His flick skill, Aqua Cross Slash, I actually am a big fan of because it has a low SP cost and does a pretty decent amount of damage. The Omega Drive is cool. That giant freeze covers a pretty decent area, but it has a little bit of a weird trick to it where whenever you first cast it, the freeze happens, but then for some reason you just knock them out of the freeze. All in all, I would say Tori's stats are aight, but he's really not the best choice. Give him like a B tier. Up next is Yerknev with some insane attack and elemental damage, but what I don't like about him is these hearts. You have to have an ally incapacitated, which sometimes happens, but I really don't count on it. His flick skill is absolutely amazing. This air hurricane uppercut does pretty good damage, and the lingering hurricane is really good. So yeah, that's always a plus. This Omega Drive, the Typhoon, I absolutely hate it. The damage is trash. The break isn't even that good. It's really only good for using it either against a giant group of Minimons or against a Mumon that's already in break status, because it's way too easy just to jump out of it. So he's all right, but he just has some flaws. So again, I'll also put him in the B tier. Up next is Kirsch. I don't think it's really even a question about her. She's a total S tier. Her hearts are amazing, involving just SP and SP recovery. Her attack doesn't seem impressive at first, but this Judgment Spear flick skill is literally top tier. It's a huge AoE that does a knock up, insane break, and insane damage. And her Omega Drive is really good for poisoning enemy bosses that just have massive HP, and it's impossible to take them down otherwise. Only thing is it's a 4-hit combo, so sometimes they can jump out of it. Again, I recommend using it after they're already broken. Natsuka has some pretty decent damage for a void element, and this up flash heroism heart, I think that looks really good, especially whenever you're using something like Megaton Punch or the air uppercut. It's a little bit of a gamble because these other two, beginning a quest and as your HP decreases, they're still good, but I think they're only good situationally. Her flick skill, Megaton Punch, in my opinion, is just one of the top tier flick skills of all time. It leaves a lingering hitbox that enemies can walk into. Enemies that are hit are sent on a trajectory path that basically makes all of the enemies around them like bowling pins. You can just knock them down like dominoes. It does a lot of break and it does a lot of damage, especially if you line up a defense break and an attack buff. You can be hitting for like 10k with this thing. Her Omega Drive, I think, is pretty bad. It does a lot of break, but you cannot touch the control stick or else it'll just move to random Minimons, and it takes forever. It's just not that good. It's really only good for using the invincibility to live through some strong attacks. To be honest, I think she is entirely carried by up flash heroism combined with Megaton Punch. It's just too good of a skill to ignore, so she'll go in the A tier. Zion is pretty tough. I hate these flick skills, having to have remaining HP below 50%. Total trash in my opinion. But this flick skill, Dash Strike, has serious combo potential, especially if you have a down flick skill that sends you backwards, because it's just like you ram into the enemy and then you jump back, ram them again, jump back. It does a lot of break, it does a lot of damage, and it's really good spam. After they're broken, you can pop his Omega Drive, which just buffs his auto attacks, makes them way stronger, makes them deal stamina damage. He's just really cool. You could set him up with like poison, freeze, and fire on auto attacks, and I could see him really carrying. Sword sword users in general are just nice to have too for mobility purposes because you can use their dash strikes to get around the maps fairly easily. Now don't get me wrong, he's definitely not the best, especially with hearts like this. I think that that's what's seriously holding him back. So B tier again. Arya does insane damage, especially if you can get lucky with this crit damage heart. She has some serious potential. Her flick skill takes a little bit of charging up, but it does insane damage. If you can line up a defense break attack buff on a broken enemy, this will melt away bosses. And her Omega Drive, pretty self-explanatory. She explodes the earth in front of her with a giant lightning nova that looks like Bahamut himself casted it. Look at that attack stat, dude. She's just an obvious S tier. Okay, so next up we're getting into some of the characters that I may have dabbled with, but I'm not really super familiar with. So if I say something wrong, please don't be mad at me. Just correct me in a comment and I'll try and do better next time. Ban doesn't look too bad. He has a pretty good spread of attack and elemental damage. He has like a heroism that's only for switching, but it actually has more attack than heroism does. This crit damage isn't as good as some of the other crit damages, and this defense is trash. The flick skill just looks like a quick AoE. It's like a get away from me kind of button. The Omega Drive is like a charge. That kind of seems like ass. That's just sort of like Zion's flick skill. I don't see how that could be that great. Maybe I'm wrong, but he just doesn't seem like a character I would pick. So right now I'm going to leave him in the C tier. All right, now I'm excited to talk about Quinn because here we got some mid elemental in attack, right? But look all the way down here at this heart. A successful break gets you 11% crit damage. Now that sounds amazing because whenever you break somebody, every hit on them is a crit. The flick skill is a heavy cost 50 damage. It looks like it charges up but sends a shockwave. Shockwaves are cool. This Omega Drive is one of the most baller Omega Drives ever. She literally just changes the battlefield, and I could see that really carrying you. Really the only thing I see holding her back is her stats, but she has a lot of SP, so that's cool. I think that she's an A tier and she's not quite to the S, but maybe. Next is Tita, and I gotta be honest, that attack is really selling me at first, but then I looked at these hearts. They're all such doo-doo butter, dude. And I'm not even gonna lie to you. I've never owned a 4-star wand user. I've just never had one, so I mean, maybe it's literally the best. This flick skill looks cool. You shoot out like a very fast projectile. That is, wow, that's super fast. So this Omega Drive looks cool, right? It does a huge explosion. It leaves this lingering effect, but hear me out. So many times I use an Omega Drive and the enemy jumps out of it. So if this thing's primary purpose is to reduce gauge, and I would only use it on an enemy whose gauge was already broken, then it kind of defeats the purpose. I'd hope it would do good damage too. But I'm sorry, just the combination of these total doo-doo hearts and that delay is throwing me off, so I think she'll just sit in like a B right now. Nia sort of runs into the same problems here. These hearts are not even really worth initiating at all. The flick skill has a little bit of a delay, but it says it deals heavy damage for only a 30 SP cost, so that could be really good. And the Omega Drive is like a delayed charge, and then it leaves the lingering field. At least this one deals heavy damage, so it's like you could break the enemy and then line it up. The hearts are just not very helpful, especially having elemental requirements for a defense buff. No. How heavy is the B tier right now? I'll put her in the B tier tentatively. Rashut is an obvious S tier. He's one of the most desired characters in the game, has really good attack and elemental damage, has heroism, which is one of the most coveted hearts. The flick skill is okay at breaking gauge, it has a little bit of movement in there, and the Omega Drive is just like straight up one-shot potential. This is how you just annihilate everything. So we might be looking at our first low rating here. Whenever I look at Till, I see trash attack and elemental damage. I see tap attack buffs, which tap attacks are like a very small amount of your damage, unless you're using someone like Zion. The Omega Drive looks like it takes forever. I mean, enemies are just going to be jumping out of that all day. There's no way that's ever gonna hit anything. And this flick skill, look how slow that is. What do you hit with that? You don't hit anything with that. I think this is our straight up first D tier. Luna over here also has some pretty low attack and elemental damage. I don't like how her hearts require her HP to decrease in order to get the effect. The flick skill says it's a 60 cost gauge break. I hope that does a lot of gauge damage because that's a massive cost. This Omega Drive looks freaking terrible to me. Anybody who has this character, I need to know. Whenever you cast this, you see the pillars that come up? Is that where the hitboxes are? because if you have to hit them with those pillars and it's random like that, that would suck. But if the pillars automatically target enemies, that would be amazing. She appears to me to be an RNG based gauge breaker, which sounds like total trash. I hope that I'm wrong about this, but right now she's a D. Kokoschka with some pretty mid attack and elemental damage, but she does have heroism. She also has right flick skill heroism, so that's awesome. This projectile is another one of those super fast projectiles. It says it does good damage and break, and it only costs 30. And the Omega Drive just straight up looks like you're sending everybody back to hell with Sulfurin's hammer. I think that she's pretty sick, but she does not quite match up to Rashut. Should she be an S? I think that I'm going to make her an A. Before you kill me, don't forget this is just like version 1. I will have more versions, I promise. This is not the last one. Vesta looks like a beast. He has opportunistic standing, which is 11% crit damage on a break. Once you break them, you're going to be critting anyways, so that's awesome. His flick skill is like a boomerang that draws enemies close to him, so you could use it as a combo starter where you could like draw them in and then megaton punch them or something. The Omega Drive just litters the battlefield with electricity, causing continuous damage over time. I really do think that this is one of the best characters in the game. I'm going to give him an S tier. Now, Ogma is really not a bad pick despite the attack. He's surprisingly good. Whenever we look at these hearts, they're not the best. He does have the flick skill percent one though, and that's all flick skills, not just a certain direction. But these other two, like 7% crit damage, really? And then crit rate, I don't really think is necessary because if you're going to be breaking them anyways, just going to be critting. So what's the point? This magical bash is kind of like a megaton punch, but with a wide arc, deals heavy damage. I think that's amazing. That's a really good skill. And then this Omega Drive, a little bit of a delay and he just sends the Ultima at you. He knocks you down with the universe. So yeah, really with the right setup, this dude could be amazing. He's definitely a must-have for hearts anyways, just to make flick skills better. I'll give him an A tier. Kalmia was almost there, total of 270 for the attack and the element, but this inherited crap, bro, I do not want my allies dying in order to activate my hearts. The flick skill is a humongous delay. It says it deals a lot of damage. It also doesn't seem like it would be the easiest one to hit. And this one is just another slow animation, but it deals heavy damage. So maybe she can deal heavy damage slowly, but I mean, her stats aren't that great. I think she's looking at like a C. Sinan kind of seems shit. He has bad stats, permanence, defense, hearts, and stuff like that. That's not good. The flick skill costs 50. It does say it does good damage. And then this other Omega Drive has a little bit of a delay, but that is a really cool Omega Drive. I would hope that that would deal a lot of damage, but everything else just really holds him back. So C tier. Letta is an absolute boss. Just look at that attack and elemental multiplier. She has surplus heroism, which you're not going to have above 80% HP all the time. So she kind of got the short end of the stick on hearts, but that flick skill, that looks amazing. And for the Omega Drive, I really don't trust these like smart AI ultimates where like the ball has to track the enemy and follow them. Too often, it's just going to focus a Minimon or not do what you're intending for it to do. She's really just carried by her stats, and that's it. I'll say that she can sit comfortably A tier, and Farasha definitely sucks. Her attack is some of the lowest in the game. These hearts are crit rate, which I find entirely useless. The flick skill has one of the longest delays I've ever seen. It's only for reducing the break gauge, and then this Omega Drive is okay. It's for reducing break gauge also. I think she's looking pretty shit. Gonna give her a D. And that is everybody. I'm not going to do these 2 and 3 stars yet, even though they are viable, so I could revisit that in the future if this video does well. Tell you what, if this video gets 100 likes, I'll straight up do the 3 stars next. So thanks so much for watching. If you got this far and you don't hate me yet, please feel free to leave a like so that more content like this comes to you in the future. But other than that, y'all, that's gonna do it for me today, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.